East Bay Regional Parks is celebrating its 90th year in 2024. The Park District currently has its history on display at the Museum of the San Ramon Valley in Danville and on its website. This episode brings the East Bay Parks Tilden story to life, starting with Wildcat Canyon. During the 1930s and 40s, the area was known as Camp Wildcat Canyon, one of 5 camps run under the Federal Works Progress Administration Civilian Conservation Corps. These camps provided labor for the building of the regional park's first infrastructure. They also served as a means for men to find employment during the Great Depression. Photo of Camp Wildcat Canyon circa 1936. Nature Camp. By the 1940s, the Park District was employing its own park staff to handle the labor needed to maintain the parks, and CCC Camp Wildcat Canyon's men were moved out. School districts with existing programs helped start the earliest naturalist programs reusing the camp's former barracks. In 1947, children began calling the nature camp Camp Taloma. Taloma translates to wildcat in the local native Chochenyo language. Photo of a school group standing outside of one of the former CCC barracks that housed a natural history museum called the Field Nature Museum in 1947. In July of 1956, the Park District dedicated the Wildcat Canyon Nature Lodge, that was more commonly called the Junior Ranger Nature Lodge. Park staff, with the assistance of some of the junior rangers themselves, built the lodge, located north of the Little Farm. This was also an opportunity to establish the entire area, Jewel Lake, the refurbished barracks, the Little Farm, and the lodge to become the Tilden Nature Area. The new lodge had museum exhibits ranging from honeybees to the geology of Jewel Lake and many insect and wildflower displays. Photos showing the ceremonious hammering the finishing touches are, left to right, board directors John McDonald, Milton Godfrey, and Robert Sibley, circa 1956. The Little Farm was dedicated on June 7, 1955, and included celebration of the Red Barn construction, which was built by students from Berkeley High School's vocational carpentry class. The original Little Farm housed Mexican burros, sheep, a pig, goats, rabbits, pigeons, chickens, and a peacock. Photo of naturalists Marian Danielson and Jack Parker with the farm animals, circa 1955. Jewel Lake is a remnant of a 1921 reservoir from a diverted waterway of Wildcat Creek soon after it was established. The water companies discovered that due to an abundance of clay particles, it was not a good source of drinking water. Jewel Lake was included in the area that first became part of the Park District and developed into a popular nature trail area for interpretive programs and a habitat for native plants and wildlife. Photo of Jewel Lake, March 1922. 100 giant sequoias were planted in dedication of the Rotary Peace Grove in 1956 with members of the Berkeley Rotary Club and Park District Board directors and staff. The plan for the grove was for the Rotary to honor individuals who made contributions toward the club's principles of international understanding, goodwill, and peace through a world fellowship. There are 50 honorees at the site, including Adlai Stevenson II, Bob Hope, Mother Teresa, Jimmy Carter, Nelson Mandela, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Photo of William Penn Mott Jr., then Park District General Manager, within U.S. Ambassador Adlai Stevenson II, plaque recipient, at the Rotary Peace Grove in 1963. Nimitz Way. Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz and his wife were frequent visitors to Tilden and enjoyed hiking along the trail from Inspiration Point to Wildcat Peak. On May 5, 1955, the Park District held an event to dedicate Nimitz Way in recognition of his love of Tilden Park and his stature in the community. Admiral Nimitz played a major role in the naval history of World War II. Photo of Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz speaking at the Nimitz Way dedication on May 5, 1955. The Tilden Merry-Go-Round was the first recreational concession to be added to the Park District. Instigated by then General Manager Richard Walpole, the 1911 Herschel Spillman Merry-Go-Round was brought from Los Angeles' Griffith Park. The Tilden Merry-Go-Round opened to the public in 1948. During its first month of operation, the merry-go-round had 40,000 riders. Photo of the newly constructed concession and housing for the Tilden merry-go-round circa 1948 and today. Before the construction of the dam that would create Lake Anza, Wildcat Creek ran across a steep ravine, creating large waterfalls and meandered across a large open space. In 1936, while the Park District was still under the Works Progress Administration and National Park Service planning, there was a need for a water source for the Tilden Golf Course. The Park District also saw the development of a new lake could offer additional swimming opportunities, as Lake Temescal was the only swimming offered at the time. The first facilities were entirely built by the WPA and PWA. Lake Anza was opened to the public on May 7, 1939. Because of the popularity of swimming, the water from the lake stopped being drained for the golf course in 1965. Photos showing Wildcat Creek waterfall near present-day Lake Anza, circa 1912. Native lands. The first inhabitants of the land where Tilden Park now stands were known as the Hukian, one of about 58 tribes who spoke an Ohlone language. Tilden's eastern slopes were likely located within the homeland of the Saklon, one of 6 tribes whose primary language is called Bay Miwok today. The Hukian and Saklon tribes had a deep and abiding relationship with the land that balanced human needs with those of all other species. They traditionally managed the land using burning, cultivating, and pruning techniques that ensured the health of the vegetation that provided shelter to a diverse population of animal life. Throughout the years of colonization, missions, and the changing landscape, Ohlone and Bay Miwok peoples continue to live and work in the Bay Area while maintaining distinct communities and advocating for their rights. Brazilian Room. The Golden Gate International Exposition was a 2-year World's Fair, 1939 to 1940, showcasing the goods of nations bordering on the Pacific Ocean. When the expo was ready to close in September 1940, EBRPD General Manager Albert Vail solicited several government exhibitors for materials acquisition. One of those exhibitors, the United States of Brazil, made a gift of its materials. Arrangements were made to transport furniture and such building materials as the Brazil Pavilion's parquet floors, jacaranda walls, and paneling and huge plate glass mirrors to Tilden Regional Park. On May 20, 1941, 1,500 visitors attended the presentation ceremonies that included civic leaders, county and city officials, and members of the social sets of Berkeley, Oakland, and nearby East Bay cities. Photo of the opening day inside the Brazilian Room, May 20th, 1941. Dairy and cattle ranching operations defined the hills and steep canyons surrounding and encompassing Tilden Regional Park beginning as early as Spanish and Mexican colonialism, and later by private ranching families that included the Sweetbriar Dairy Farm, the Brissac Ranch, and Kern Ranch. In 1906, East Bay Water Companies acquired much of the land in Tilden to create protected watershed. The last homestead and farm belonged to Peter Bruno, a native of Genoa, Italy, who came to the Bay Area in 1896 and worked as a water company guardian. The Bruno family were also one of the pioneer cattle ranchers in the area. Photo of the Bruno family members in front of their cattle ranch homestead near the present-day Brazilian Room in Tilden. It was unanimously agreed that Major Charles Tilden was the voice that could reckon with the East Bay Water Board and former California Governor George Pardee for regional parklands. Affectionately known as the father of the East Bay Regional Parks, Tilden had the long-standing stature in the community as a successful and philanthropic businessman and helped come to a beneficial agreement with Pardee, establishing a win-win land purchase for the Park District with a modest property tax rate of 5 cents per $100 of assessed value. Major Tilden went on to serve as board president of the East Bay Regional Park District from 1934 to 1950. Wildcat Canyon, as it was called in 1934, was soon renamed Tilden Regional Park in his honor. At Tilden's last banquet on July 20th, 1950, at age 93, a bronze bust of Major Tilden was unveiled. Charles Tilden passed away 4 months later. Photo of Charles Tilden's grandchildren at the unveiling. Left to right, Charles Lee Tilden II, Mary Lee Tilden, and Nancy Lee Tilden, July 20th, 1950, and today. The Regional Parks Botanic Garden started as a cooperative agreement between the Park District and the U.S. Forest Service. Howard McMinn, a professor of botany at Mills College, who stood as a representative on the Regional Parks Board for Dr. Aurelia Reinhardt, led the creation of a botanic garden for the Park District. McMinn also helped find just the right manager, who was then working for the U.S. Forest Service, Jim Roof, who served as the Botanic Garden Director from 1940 to 1976. A special committee that included McMinn and Board Director August Vollmer, as well as others, including the Sierra Club, selected the former site of Peter Bruno's old dairy ranch, where the Botanic Garden is situated today. The construction of the garden began January 1st, 1940, and by 1941 the Botanic Garden had added over 30,000 native plants. Jim Roof at the Botanic Garden, 1971. On November 7, 1937, 400 guests attended the preview of the new golf course. Major Charles Lee Tilden, then Regional Parks Board President, gave the opening address. 50 well-known champion players were in attendance. The celebration also included a list of community leaders congratulating the formation of the Park District. "Our work has only just started," declared Board Director Dr. Aurelia Reinhardt in her address to the crowd. Much of the labor for clearing, grading, laying of pipes, etc., was provided by Works Progress Administration crews. It was a dawn-to-dusk, 6-days-a-week job. The clubhouse was constructed the same year and opened to the public on November 11th. Austin Dunn was one of the earliest employees of the newly formed East Bay Regional Park District in the mid-1930s. His story is notable and compelling. Dunn was a young African-American man enrolled in one of the Civilian Conservation Corps camps in the East Bay. Though research on his story continues, it is likely he was stationed at Camp San Pablo, today's Kennedy Grove Regional Recreation Area, which operated for much of its time as a segregated colored camp in the Federal New Deal program. Dunn was subsequently hired as a park laborer and equipment operator by the district. Tragically, Dunn was killed in a workplace accident on the Tilden Golf Course in 1949. Workers soon erected a memorial drinking fountain and plaque in his honor. Dunn's story helped shed light on the important role that the New Deal played in the district's formation, not only in providing temporary labor and crucial funds, but also as a source of permanent employees. In the context of the times, Dunn's hire also stands out as one of the district's earliest efforts to create a racially diverse workforce. Photo of the district staff and board members gather on the Tilden Golf Course at the newly constructed memorial to fallen fellow worker Austin Dunn in 1949. In the 1960s, the plaque had to be relocated and is now situated along the path from the parking lot to the putting green. The area that includes a fully functioning Tilden Corporation yard, with a fire station, central stores, mechanic shop, and park staff offices is situated in an area with quite a military history. During World War II, the area was known as South Park Army Camp and contained a radar control station. Up toward Vollmer Peak, 2 artillery gun emplacements were staffed around the clock. Only after the end of the war was it revealed that South Park Army Camp's radar station was the watchdog of the West. The secret radar station had 3 stories underground, with 4-foot-thick concrete bomb and gas-proof walls. Tilden had a number of military sites it offered for defense and hosted servicemen and women in the parks for recreational breaks during World War II. Photo taken inside the radar station during World War II, formerly at the site of the Tilden Corp Yard. August Vollmer may have been best known for his long career in policing, but with the Park District he became involved when the idea of East Bay Parks was very new. Vollmer volunteered his time to speak at public engagements and attend meetings to support the creation of the Park District. He also wrote a great amount of correspondence on how parks and recreation activities were positive alternatives for all communities and a significant deterrent to criminal behavior. Vollmer served on the first Park District Board. When the board voted to rename Bald Peak to honor his work with the parks, he humbly did not approve. Photo of August Vollmer stands second from left with the new regional park signs, while Dr. Aurelia Reinhardt is to his right, the East Bay Parks. General Manager Elbert Vale stands right. Photo taken in 1938. Eric Thompson, and now daughter Ellen Thompson, have been the concessionaires that brought the Tilden steam train to reality. At the time in the early 1950s, the Park District was eager to sign on attractions to Tilden Park that had already included a merry-go-round, trout pond, tennis courts, swimming area, a farm, golf course, and botanic garden. All that brought hundreds of thousands of visitors to the parks. Through the early years of operation, Eric Thompson continued to make improvements to the little train, as well as cared for and planted the vegetation in the area. Many of the redwood trees were planted by him and railway staff. In the 1960s, the Golden Gate steamers moved their miniature train operations from Reinhardt Redwood Regional Park to the railway. Prior to that time, the railway was known as the Tilden South Gate and Pacific Railway. Photo of Board Director Thomas Roberts sits at the throttle with Board Directors John McDonald and Robert Sibley behind him, as they pose for a publicity shot marking the opening of the steam train on August 16, 1952, while operator Eric Thompson at right. Many thanks to the East Bay Regional Park District for this history lesson on Tilden Park and for most of the photos used. All this and much more is available on their website, and I hope to do a few more of these. Additional photos from the producer Mark Harrigan and Getty Images. Background music from Facebook Studio titled Out in the Sun.